Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books. We publish books of all types and genres. So whether you have a book in your head, a book that's actually ready to go, or maybe 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer. And yes, we do get envelopes filled with loose leaf. I got one yesterday. Please feel free to visit redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I am so excited today to be joined by two authors who absolutely unleashed themselves. Christiane Allison is the author of Infinitus, and I have to tell you what she says about Infinitus here. Christiane writes, the Global Fellowship rescued the Earth from the chaos of hundreds of nations at war. Now, united in peace, all community citizens have free access to food, housing, education, and medical care. But in return, for a few hours a day, they must contribute their brain power to the worldwide computer system known as the grid. Well, you and I both know that's not going to go well. So we're going to welcome Christiane Allison. Our second author today will be Susan Menchell, author of Lucky the Starfish. And as a sister to a mentally retarded older brother, Susan felt different from other kids. This book comes from out of resolutions that differences always aren't a bad thing. Lucky the Starfish finds that his differences are a good thing. Living in New York and having worked for 36 years as a registered nurse, Susan has experienced countless events in her life and career, working with people and caring for people in all sorts of environments. So please welcome Susan and Allison. Allison, thank you so much for joining us today. And I know you're joining us, I mentioned just before we started, you are my furthest away American guest ever. Tell us a little bit about where you are today. And you're sitting there in that tank top, which is killing me.
So I am from Wasilla, Alaska, about an hour north of Anchorage. It is threatening snow outside, and I am nice and toasty warm in my house.
Is it threatening snow every day in Wasilla, Alaska in the winter?
No, not really. But when you open the curtains and it's just solid gray, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna get some flurries or something. It's
Have you lived there your whole life?
No, actually. I was born in Maryland. I was a military brat, so I lived for a while in Louisiana and in North Carolina and Missouri. And then we finally made it back here because after having lived here when I was very young, my parents couldn't stand being anywhere else. So we eventually made it back when I was about 11 or 12.
I never thought that Wasilla, Alaska is that place that my heartstrings are tugging for, like Venice, you know?
It really is one of those places. Like, it is absolutely gorgeous. And honestly, a lot of Alaskans like lose sight of how gorgeous it is. Like, you start to take it for granted and you don't realize it until all of a sudden, like, it's a clear day and the mountains are out and it's like, wow, yeah. Okay, that's just beautiful. I always tell people that everything in Alaska is bigger, just in general. So like the wildlife is bigger, the plants are bigger. Like it's an interesting experience, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I've been to Alaska, only the part that you see from the cruise ship as you wave by, and even that part was fantastic. And you're right, stunning, absolutely stunning.
My sister and my mother just went to Alaska 2 years ago.
Really?
And wanted me to come. I should have went because they were sending me beautiful pictures from this cruise ship, and they were stopping and all
that cruise ship. Yes.
And Alaska, they loved it. They loved their tour of Alaska. They didn't want to come back.
It was so
it's beautiful.
That even on the cruise ship, I would sit outside and we would eat meals on the deck wearing a coat, by the way, because it was just too pretty not to look.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's exactly what they said.
Wow. Do you have like moose in your boat
taking pictures? You know,
it is gorgeous, and Susan and I are hailing right here from Long Island, Queens, New York. Not quite the same scenery.
No. Although we have the farm, we have the Little Neck Farm Museum. So we have a bunch of like wild animals thrown on this land that's
about the size of
years old. What'd you say?
that it's probably about the size of Christiane's backyard.
Yeah, well, they have a winery, so they
They
built
have
a
a
winery
winery?
big enough. Yeah, they built a winery in the back of the farm now. So, and then you go there, and it's nice in the spring. They have little baby pigs and little sheep, and they have some cows that are there like year round that they keep.
Okay, Susan, I
Kind of
live 5
fun.
minutes from that, and I did not know there was a winery there. So when this show is finished, I know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So during these long, cold, dark winters, is that when you write, Christiane?
Well, I pretty much write year round, but the long winters help, along with any other time that you're just stuck inside for other reasons. Like I think one of the best times that I ever cranked out the most words at once was when I had the flu and I couldn't get out of bed, and I just wrote every single day. I got like 25,000 words or something out because I was sick. But yeah, other than that, it's something that you get used to. Like I said, Alaska in the winter is a lot like Arizona in the summer. You spend most of your time indoors and you kind of acclimate to that. What really gets me is the summers, because with the summers, it's the polar opposite. We have this huge amount of sunlight that lasts way longer than anywhere else. And you don't even realize how much it affects you until you're running around outside and you realize, oh my gosh, it's 1 a.m. and you're out gardening or doing something else and you have no idea what time it is. And it's because the sun just gives you that much energy. So Alaskans definitely take advantage of the summers and all of that daylight when we've got it. That's for sure.
Saying being stuck inside, I wrote actually 2 other books. One is here, and I drew this. I painted
Oh,
the
wow.
one of that. These are all poetry books because I
Did you
was
do
just
this
stuck
during
in a
pandemic?
place.
Because I'm thinking pandemic is kind of like Alaska in the winter.
Yeah, I'm gonna start
Right?
writing again. I'm gonna start writing more.
Yeah, I'm so glad, Christiane, that you said that the most writing you ever did was when you had the flu. And I must say that so many people have taken such advantage of this
True.
crazy lockdown and have written book after book after book. And I think that's just amazing. I'm so glad you said it. It's so inspiring. Like, you know what? Take advantage, folks, because just like Alaska in the summer, we're going to be allowed out soon. And when we're allowed
Right.
out, then we're not going to write anymore. So do it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You totally have to do it now because, like I said, when they open those doors, man, it's all over.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see a lull happen, I think.
It is. There's definitely going to be a creative lull. So, Christiane, tell us a bit about Infinitus. How did you get inspired to write this? I mean, that's quite well, I don't know if it's such a stretch. Sometimes I think that might be kind of true, and that's what worries me. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that's actually the kind of futuristic society that I created for the book is all based off of things that I see happening in today's society. And I just took those things and I pushed them as far as I could see them going. So it's a really, really interesting world that was created out of it. You've got this global government, you've got this global computer system, because eventually they realized, okay, it's way more energy efficient to run the computer system off of the human brain instead of running it off of hardware. And so they created this system. But then that same government, one of the interesting aspects of the society is that there are no relationships that are long-term. In fact, the society teaches that long-term relationships are unhealthy. They call it obsessive attachment syndrome, or OAS, and they actually classify it as an illness.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my God. It's like Hollywood. Yes. There's no long-term relationships. It's like
right. Everything is like about the individual, about the individual's contribution to society or to the community. But of course, you've got your rebel factions and you've got, your people that are on the outside. My main character's on the outside. She's what is called a shirker in the future. The politically correct term is the disconnected, because they're not wet wired into the grid. They don't have the wetware grown onto their brain to be able to connect. And they don't contribute to society. Therefore, they're called shirkers, but they're kind of the homeless population of the future. They don't have any of the benefits of the community members, and they have to get by on their own. And that's where she comes from. So, and she has a couple of different reasons for that. One of them is that she has a genetic illness. So she and her brother and her mother all have this genetic illness. It's the same one that I actually have in real life. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it's a connective tissue disorder. And it makes her more fragile, but she's afraid that this community is going to find out that she's sick with this and will institutionalize her and she'll disappear.
What's the name of the illness?
It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS for short.
Yes, yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's classified as a rare disease, but they're finding that it's a lot more common than they once thought that it was.
Really?
There's lots of different subtypes to it and different versions, because it basically means that the collagen in your body has a bad blueprint for making it. And collagen is the substance that gives you all of your cells their strength or their rigidity. And so when you don't have good collagen, and depending on which collagen is affected, it makes your tissues weaker and more fragile and more prone to damage.
Okay.
So that's one reason that she's outside of the community, is because she's hiding the fact that she has this that would otherwise be found out if they looked at her DNA. And the other half is that her father passed down his lineage of faith. And in that future, there are no faiths. Faiths are not a thing. And so it's definitely something that is frowned upon and kind of looked at strangely. And so she wants to maintain that the way that her family has maintained that for years. So they've only been able to do that by being shirkers.
Oh my gosh. I love the way you have intertwined fiction, this supernatural and everything else with your own personal history. That's
Yes.
amazing.
Well, it was really fun because, I had the original idea for the overall story and the crisis in it and all that kind of stuff. And I had started fiddling with it a little bit. And I remember I was driving with my mother, and at some point I was just complaining and I was just griping. I was like, nobody understands what it's like to live in a body like this, to live in a body that's fighting you all the time. And she looks at me and she goes, well, nobody's ever written it, have they? And I was like, oh, ow. Yes, in fact. So then I kind of looked at it and I was like, well, what would Gina look like if she had Ehlers-Danlos? Like, how would that affect things? And when I started weaving that in, it just took over. It just took over the whole plot, and it was really amazing.
My God.
It was really cool.
So you were already writing the book when your mother said that.
Well, I was kind of in the early, chewing on it stages. I'd written a couple of scenes. I hadn't gotten terribly far. A lot of the other aspects of the book, even though it's science fiction, is all based off of aspects and things that I've actually learned about in our society today, like scientific articles and whatnot. There's a lot of science in it that seems like really far-fetched or really crazy. But it's things that we're already experimenting with. And so I'm just going, well, okay, let's say we succeed in that. Let's see where that goes and let's run with that. There's a whole population in the books of chimeras, which are actually human and animal hybrids that have those animal genetics woven into their DNA from super soldier programs like years and years before. They just, whenever they pop back up in the population and somebody suddenly has these visible or physical characteristics or traits, they're referred to as a chimera. And so you get to see those characters as well, kind of along the way as she's making her way through the story. And one of the main characters actually is a chimera. It's just that his characteristics are so hidden, most people don't know that he is.
Oh, very cool. Now, is this a standalone book? Is there going to be more? Is everything get all,
Oh, there's definitely going to be more.
It sounds like the beginning of a trilogy to me.
Yeah, so it has a prelude novelette that I released in 2019. It's called The Global Fellowship. And it's a little bitty book, but it just introduces you to the world, and you get to meet Gina's younger brother, Arthur, on his journey in that story. But the main novels in the book will follow Gina and then this other character, Hawk. And this is the first of at least 4 novels.
Oh, 4. My goodness gracious.
Wow.
Now, does that mean that you have them outlined already, the 4 novels, or you just have this feeling it's going to be a certain number?
Well, I have them outlined as much as a pantser outlines. So I know like the main crux moments, and I know, okay, that's 4 books, that's not 3.
Gotcha.
You know, I couldn't
Okay.
figure
Okay.
out what the plot of those are, but yeah, I'm definitely a pantser, not a plotter.
Okay. Wow. I always am in awe of pantsers. I am just way too, type A anal to be a pantser in my life. So I think that is fabulous. So, should I ask, how's book 2 going? Are we
It's
working on
going
it?
well. So
Sure.
I've got the first one, I've got the second one drafted. I'm at that stage where you have to rip it into tiny pieces and put it back together. So that's where I'm at with it. But it's coming together. It's really exciting. In the first book, you focus a lot on Gina and Hawk and their kind of flight and trying to deal with the situation that's happening and with getting away from everybody. But in the second book, it's called Chimera Rising. And you're going to see the Chimeras actually make a move to form an independent nation, and which like is this huge to do, and it's this huge issue because most of the Chimeras are shunned by the community, and the community teaches the population to fear them, but the community also uses those same Chimeras as its own operatives. So they have their fingers kind of in everything in the background, in behind the scenes. And when they move to get out, it's a really big deal. So it's kind of exciting to see where that's going.
Well, you only have a couple of more weeks before the sun starts coming out again. So
Right.
hurry up because, do you have daylight savings time in Alaska?
We do. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
So once that hits and it gets light out again, I mean, I'm sure it's negative 30 degrees up there. What is it up there? Is it negative?
Oh, it's not too bad. I think last week it dropped down to around 0, maybe -6 or so. But this week it's above freezing. So.
Oh, wow. That's like New York. Okay.
I know, you guys got all of our snow, and we were like, "Hey, give it back! What are you doing?"
and we don't know what to do with it, man. We had someone last week or the week before on from Texas, and oh my gosh, they didn't think their internet would last to do the show because they got a half an inch and they didn't know what to do with it down there. So
Well, they got all beat up with the snow. They didn't.
no, and they're not prepared for it. They don't actually own a plow.
They don't have heat and stuff like that for.
Nope. Meanwhile, Christiane's got snow plows on the front of her bicycle. She's
not bicycles, but ATVs. Yeah.
You are ready for anything. Well, completely different than science fiction fantasy. Let's just take a complete 180 for Lucky the Starfish. I love when we get such different books on the show at one time. Lucky the Starfish is here to teach us that it's not always a bad thing to have differences, and differences can be a good thing. And I kind of hear that in Infinitus also, that being different is not always bad. So
Yeah, Lucky has an unusual arm, so he has an arm that's sort of bent like this.
Right. Oh,
So
wait. I'm going to go back to show the cover so we could see the bent arm. Does everyone see that bent arm?
he has a bent arm. And
Oh, I see. I thought he was just waving, but now I see it's a bent arm. You're right.
yeah, so Lucky feels unlucky, and I had an autistic brother, and I used to take care of him and try to make him feel okay with himself, because he constantly felt like odd man out and was kind of shunned in our little community where I lived. And so I came up with this idea for this starfish, and then he meets a fish named Boo. And the fish named Boo becomes his sidekick and takes him under his wing, so to speak, or his fin, and talks to him about, what it is to have this bent arm, and that he keeps getting thrown back in the water because he's not perfect like all the other starfish.
Oh.
Meanwhile, all the other starfish are sitting on a shelf all dried out, because they're beautiful and they're so perfect. So he gets to be free in the ocean. I'm giving away the whole story, but the whole point is that sometimes you have something that's, that makes you like an outcast.
Right.
That kind of brings you in to a bigger picture so that he gets to be free for his whole life long, because of his abnormal arm. So him and Boo are, just these two little creatures in the big ocean. And I had this idea to write Lucky the Starfish, and I paint. So I was drawing like people, a starfish, and then a person who was a fisherman with a net and all of that stuff. And it winds it up that I was like, this is a story. I have to put the story together
Oh,
and assemble it into a book because it would be good for kids to read, to understand that something abnormal might be the very thing that makes something a prize, would be a prized possession. You know what I mean? It could be
absolutely.
different.
You know what
Yeah.
I absolutely adore, and I said when I introduced you and Lucky that I couldn't find two books that were more different than you and Christiane's with a sci-fi book. But quite frankly, we've got a lot of similarities here, and both of you are writing from a place of dealing with something that is different, shedding
Right.
some attention on it so that people who are similarly afflicted understand that they're not alone, that differences are not bad, that it is what makes you unique. I think it's just so amazing that both of you in a sense started with a similar mission, shall we say, and took them in completely different directions, one into a children's book and one into this sci-fi thriller kind of thing. And it just goes to show that the seed of an idea can be expressed in so many different ways. Amazing, Susan. That is just amazing that you took that and you want to reach out to children. And Christiane, I love that your mother said, "Well, nobody knows what it's like unless you write it." You know,
Right.
it's kind of the same thing. Books are so much about getting the message across, and you both realize that. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
that your
this
book.
Yeah, absolutely.
this one is my newest one, and then the other one that I wrote, this actually popped up because I was stuck in here with a leg brace on for an ACL repair, and I wrote this book in 1999.
Uh-huh.
So it's stuff that I put together from when I was 16 until I was 33.
And now you said you painted that cover?
Yeah, it's up in front of me on the wall.
Oh wow! What is it? What is it? Watercolors or what is that?
It's watercolor.
Beautiful.
And it's a little bit bigger on the wall. The actual photo, this is kind of slimmed down to
Right.
what the picture is.
Right, right.
Something
Wow.
walking alone on the beach.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I had all these poems from when I was 16. I wrote this poem called I think I don't remember, Unloved or something, and it's I am a cauldron of heat and flame,
Mhm.
self-consuming in disarray. I am the soul of an unloved woman, and I was 16 years old when I wrote that.
Wow. My goodness gracious. Well,
So that's one of them that's in here, and I've had some other poems published in some like versions with a bunch of group of people.
hmm,
I have one that has to do with me sitting under a bridge in Whitestone, and you know where that is.
I'm sure I do.
The Whitestone Bridge, and it's about how everything melds together, like the old glass and the algae rocks, and everything sort of one piece. And it was published by this group
Fantastic.
that I belong to, and it's basically me learning that I don't stick out because from having a brother who was so ill and going through so many different problems with him, he was sick all the time, um, it made me feel like I had to take care of everybody. But then when I would go off to the Whitestone Bridge or the Throgs Neck Bridge and write, I belonged with everybody. So that's what that poem is about,
Oh
under
my
the
gosh.
bridge.
Oh, the power of words. The power of words, both of you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that we have worked this pandemic as well as possible. And while it's not over yet, so we still have time. It's still dark out. We're still stuck inside. How about some tips for our writers out there who I'm trying to say, quick, quick, take advantage? What would you say to someone who wants to write, whether it's poetry, like Susan, or full length novels, or or a quadrology or whatever you call all four of them together. Christiane, what would you say to somebody in order to get them started?
So my feedback is always the same with this one, and it's that you should join our local writers group, or a national writers group, just some kind of writers group, because it can add so much onto your journey from craft to publishing, and everything in between. And I started out when I decided I wanted to start writing professionally, I ended up almost by accident at a Writers Guild meeting here in Alaska, and found out that their conference was the very next like week, and was like, well, I guess I'll go. And so I ended up going and had this like fantastic experience, met so many other writers in my area, and got connected to so many resources. And now I'm actually the president of the Alaska Writers Guild. So it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I know that I could not have made the journey that I've made. I went from 2016 to now. I've published 4 books in basically 4 years.
Wow.
And 2 of those are the novelette and the novel, and 2 of them are children's picture books. But there's no way that I could have done that without the support and the knowledge that I got from the writers groups. So
That's a great shout out, not just to your particular writers group, but writers want to help. Writers are a great community. During pandemic, I can't help but see so many writers groups on Facebook. I mean, if you're just,
right.
If you don't know a group to join, please just go onto Facebook, test them out. There's a gazillion of them, and you'll know within a few posts and some feedback if it's your people. You know what I mean? Like there's groups kind of for everyone. So
absolutely.
There's also groups to read for if you want to read poetry. So if you want to go out, I mean, I'm sure now they'll be open back up.
Exactly.
People do stand up and read their poetry. It helps to get it out there so that you get feedback and you feel good about yourself. Because I did, before I could ever write the book Visions, I had to go and read all of those poems and see how people reacted to which poem and which ones people gave me a lot of feedback on. So feedback is very important. Even if you do it with your editor, like you have an editor, you have to find somebody who's going to read the stuff with you while they're helping type it up and put it together.
Right.
Give you feedback on the photos, on the book covers, on the insides, what they think of what you're writing, what their favorite part is. It's good. You meet other people.
Absolutely. It's so great to meet other people, to get other opinions out there, to get the support from other people so that, writing in one sense could be very lonely. You're alone, you're in a room, you're typing, but really it's such a community of people who are out there cheering for you. And hey, you could join the Wasilla writing group. I'm sure she'd have you.
Right? Oh yeah, the Alaska Writers Guild is free. Our monthly meetings are free to anybody, and right now they're online. So literally anybody can just jump on and join us.
I'm sure because nowadays everything is online that everyone has kind of accidentally or on purpose joined things that
right.
When we go back to in person, I'm kind of like, how are you going to go to that meeting?
I know one of our members is like, she's got this group she started attending for poetry in like New Hampshire or something, and she's like, I don't know what's going to happen when they go back to not being online.
I know. I think that about a lot of things. I mean, even this show we used to film in a studio on Long Island with authors sitting on a couch, we're all drinking wine. It was great. I mean, we had a grand old time. But ever since we went on Zoom with this show and, are doing things remotely, well, at Christiane, you'd never be on that show.
Right.
Just about every episode, we have people who would have never been on that show before. And I'm actually thinking in my head now, I love being in a studio. I love sitting with my authors on the couch. I love drinking the wine. It's all good. But I don't think that we're going to do that exclusively. I think we're going to keep this format maybe every other week or something, because we've been able to reach out on a global level. And the same thing with the Alaska Writers Guild. You might still, have your meeting in person, but have a little camera set up to stream it for all those people who can't make it.
That's actually exactly what we're going to try to figure out how to do.
Huh.
So we're not sure whether we're going to do the camera bit, but we're at least going to have a mic and then the presentations going through Zoom so that somebody can follow along and listen in.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
perfect.
we don't want to cut off all those people. My mom used to live up in Westchester and moved down here, and then never went to her quilt guild anymore because it was too far away. And now that it's online, she's back in the quilt guild. I'm thinking,
Right.
gosh, I hope you get to stay in the quilt guild.
In Alaska, that's a really big deal because for our group, we had 3 regions. We had Anchorage, Fairbanks, and the Valley, the Matanuska Valley out here. And the problem was we had so many members that couldn't attend any of those meetings before we went virtual. So I had already intended when I came in last January to transition more to being online, but then COVID hit and it was like, okay, well now we're entirely online. And now we've got our members from Soldotna, from Kodiak, from places that could never, ever get into a meeting, being able to actually attend and participate. And they're so jazzed about that. I'm like, well, I'm certainly not going to take it away from them.
Exactly.
Stephanie, do you also publish through Red Penguin Books?
Well, I run Red Penguin Books. No, but Christiane doesn't.
No, what do you
Christiane
mean?
doesn't. But
So I published through Allison Publishing.
No,
fantastic.
no. But I'm saying, can somebody publish through Red Penguin
Oh,
Books?
absolutely. We have authors that are from all over the world that are publishing through Red Penguin Books.
So is it you who we contact to
Yep.
do that?
Just contact me. You can just
Okay.
throw a baseball out your window, Susan,
And you'll catch it.
and I'll catch it. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Nice.
Unlike Christiane, that would have to throw a bald eagle and 4 weeks
Yeah.
later I'd get it.
Yeah,
I have to put it on an airliner and fly it down to you.
yeah.
Absolutely. But yes, you could just contact me at redpenguinbooks.com or you have my email address at this point.
Yeah.
So it's so funny how we're talking about this because the world post-COVID is not going to be exactly the same as the world pre-COVID,
No.
but a lot of it for good reasons because all those people in Kodiak are now members of the Alaska Writers Guild.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't want those Kodiak writers not to have Writers Guild. Where is Kodiak, by the way? Is that like in the Arctic Circle?
No, Kodiak is further down, but it's actually an island that's entirely set. So it's not on the road system. And so I actually know one of the writers from Kodiak. She's wonderful. And she and I got connected because we were both participating in the NYC Midnight Flash Fiction Contest.
Okay.
And she had asked, like, is anybody else doing this? And they were like, well, I know Christiane is. So they sent her over to me and we got connected and had a great time. But she was constantly telling me that, like, I want to go to the conference, but I have to fly there just to get to Anchorage. So yeah.
Funny. That's so funny. Well, while you put in a plug for Flash Fiction, and I know Susan writes poetry, I'm just going to put in a quick plug because over at Red Penguin Books, we have anthologies of Flash Fiction, poetry, things like that are going out twice a month with short form. So Christiane, I'm going to send it to you to get you and all of your Alaskan.
Yeah, I have one of those. I have a little red book.
Exactly. You've got the red one, the standout book. So we need to get Christiane
book. It's
involved
awesome.
also.
I just started reading it. I love it.
Awesome. So let's get you submitting to the next one. You're a poet. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
So besides submitting to that, because I'm totally plugging to get these great writers involved, what is next on your writing agenda? And that better be next. But besides that, Christiane, I know you're polishing up book 2. Anything else going on with you? Do you work on more than one book at a time, or you kind of?
I do. I don't work on one book at a time. I just can't, like, and to be truthful, like when I published Infinitus and before it was even finished, I'd written like 50,000 words into Chimera Rising before I'd even finished Infinitus, which is good because you see further in the story and you go, oh, that person's really important. I should make them bigger in the first one, know.
Exactly.
So you're able to pull the strings together. But for me, I actually have a couple applications I've submitted for grants and things in the works because I want to publish my memoir.
Oh, wonderful.
And I expect that to be a much longer term project. I expect that to take me a long time. But in addition to being an author, I'm actually a criminal justice reform activist.
Ooh.
And I got into that because my husband was wrongfully convicted in 2015 So all of Infinitus was actually written while my husband was separated from me by unjust incarceration.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. Yes, it was about 4.5 years before his case was overturned. And so my two children's picture books that I published first were actually Why Can't Uncle Come Home, which is based on my real niece and nephew. And it's the first children's picture book in the world that actually tackles the issue of wrongful conviction for a very young child who's going through one.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh.
the sequel that got Rasmussen Foundation grant for publishing this is Timmy and Kate Go to Visit. And so rightful or wrongful, it doesn't matter. This is for any child that's going through a prison visitation experience. And so those are my babies. But as much as I've woven kind of my experiences and my stories into my fiction, tackling your memoir is a very different thing. And so it's something that I want to share with the world, because a lot of people have no idea how unjust our justice system is, and how many people are affected by wrongful conviction. Because the National Registry of Exonerations has over 2,500 people at this point that are just the people who've actually succeeded in getting justice after being wrongfully convicted. It doesn't even count all the people that haven't got there, which is just the tip of the iceberg. So, yeah.
What a history. Now you actually changed your, job, your career, your everything, went for more training, everything else. What was involved with all of that?
So what I basically worked for the state. I worked for the state's post-secondary education organization, and I ran an online software system for career education and career information for people that were planning whatever it is that they wanted to do. But with my illness, the case against us is, like, at this point, it is 12 years old. And it is still ongoing, and it's just a nightmare. But I have a genetic condition that's worsened by stress. And so by the time we got to the trial over 7 years in, my health was so bad that when they took my husband from me, I couldn't fake it anymore. I couldn't keep working and doing what I was doing because I literally physically couldn't do it. And so that's when I decided to make the transition, because I realized that no matter what was going on, no matter how sick I was, as long as I could still speak, because I use Dragon Naturally Speaking as well, I could still write. So that's when I decided to go for it.
That's
Oh
awesome.
my gosh, that's amazing.
Incredible story.
What a story. I mean, gosh, 4 years you said he was away from you?
4.5.
4.5.
So he's back with you now?
Yes, thank the Lord. Yes, he came home before COVID.
Oh my gosh, thank God.
Yeah, it was a huge deal, because he came home in September, and COVID hit in March. And since COVID hit, that you haven't been allowed to visit anybody in any of the prisons in our state. They've cut off visitation entirely.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness he's.
That's some story.
That is amazing. Oh boy, do you have those children's books? Such an important topic. I've never seen children's books like that.
Right. Well, and the first time that I ever pitched the first one, Why Can't Uncle Come Home, to somebody in the publishing industry, the response that I got was, well, that seems a little dark for children. And I was like, these kids are going through this,
right,
whether you think that it's good for them or not. Like, that's actually an intentional choice by the industry to not provide them any resources, to be honest. And that's when I decided, well, I'm going to do it myself.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said,
Very
yes,
cool.
it's dark and it's terrible that children have to go through this. So let's at least make sure that we have some materials for them to understand what's going on and that they're not alone in this.
Right. And when you write for children, it's very different. It's not the same as writing for an adult, especially on subjects like this, because they don't have the same fears we have. They don't have the same questions we have. They are looking through the world at a completely different lens. And we go, like the one about visiting the prison. As adults, we're afraid of who else is in there. We're afraid of, whether it's the inmates or the staff or whatever it is. Like, that's what our focus is at. But a child, especially a very young child like that, they're afraid of the metal detector. It's loud, it's huge, it makes noise, it's, you know, it, and they, you know, my niece was too afraid to go through it without her father holding her hand. It was just not going to happen, you know. And so you're addressing just completely different things, and as scary as the topic of wrongful conviction is for an adult, because we know there's so many causes and there's so many, you know, injustices involved with it, and it's so hard. For a child, you know, the story boils down to the basic concept of Mama reminding Timmy of a time that he blamed Kate for something that had happened because he knew that he wasn't the culprit, you know. And it's like, but you didn't actually see Kate do this, and it wasn't really Kate's fault.
Right.
You know, it was a vase that had been broken, and it had been broken on its own when the shelf collapsed. And so, you know, just conveying something in very simple terms doesn't have to be dark. It just allows the child to exercise their emotions and to actually share with you and to process what it is that they're going through or what their friend might be going through.
Absolutely. Oh, such an important topic. And you're right. That's something that I've never ever seen. And I'm so thankful that you wrote them and got them out there for kids.
Thank you.
It is important. And you know what? I wish they were available. So, you know, there's a lot of kids involved in this, you know, scenario that have parents or relatives, wrongful or rightful. But like you said, it's very scary. And
Right.
Addressed.
I think the current statistics show that there's over 2.4 million children in the United States just with an incarcerated parent.
Wow.
That's not counting aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, and, you know, close family friends and everything else. So there's literally millions of children that is their reality.
That publisher you sent it to didn't jump on that, because that's a huge potential audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Have a book to read.
Exactly.
Right.
That's just huge. Absolutely. Well, next time you're writing those kinds of books that have a huge audience, send them my way if you're getting rejected elsewhere.
Okay.
Absolutely. Susan, what's next on your writing schedule? What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm not sure whether I want to write something like she said, like a memoir, or something related to being stuck in here during COVID. There's something brewing.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be doing with like being alone so much and going inside rather than outside for entertainment, you know, meditating and contemplating changes in life. My job is changing. I don't know if that happened because of COVID or not, but I don't know. I think I'm gonna write some sort of novel, right? Rather than poetry. I think I'm gonna just start writing what my feelings are about.
Okay.
Changes
Go
I've
where the pen
been
takes you.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we just have to go where the pen takes you. Well, let's just remind our viewers of our authors and where to find their books. Christiane Allison's Infinitus. It is book 1. There's more to come, so read this. And there's a bit of a prequel novella that you could also grab, so that it'll wet your whistle until the next one comes out. But also not featured on this particular slide, her children's books are just amazing. And if you or a family member are in that situation that you want those books, I could definitely see, if I were in that scenario, I would want those books for the children in my family.
And if you go to infinitussaga.com, you'll be in part of the AllisonPublishing.com website, and you can find the children's books on the same site.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad you said that. And Lucky the Starfish by Susan Menchell. And you'll, with both books, learn a little bit about people who are not the same as everyone else and how they are dealing with those differences, because different is not always bad. And I can't thank you two enough for joining us today on Between the Covers. What an inspiration in writing and in life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was I really enjoyed it.
This was great.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit BetweenTheCoversTV.com. By the way, at BetweenTheCoversTV.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.